So let me ask you a question. What if telling the truth became a cultural movement? Not a branding slogan, not a PR strategy, but a radical collective commitment, a revolution of sorts. In a culture drowning in deceit, apathy, and moral cowardice, truth has become an act of defiance. And courage, real, everyday courage, may be the last line of defense for our free and fair society. Now, truth is not partisan. At least it shouldn't be. It's not about left or right. It's about character and integrity. Being honest about what's happening in our society, in our communities, with each other, it shouldn't be seen as a partisan act. It should be seen as a moral one, a civic one. And truth should unite us all. It should be a common denominator, but instead, it's been weaponized. It's been diluted, doubted. So many of us are afraid of being seen as political that we've stopped being principled. But courage is not exclusive. In times of civic decay and institutional weakness, the refusal to speak up becomes a moral failure. So reclaiming our collective conscience demands that we choose truth, even when convenience tempts us to be silent. Now, we're often told, stay in the middle, don't offend, don't speak up. Many people, good people, smart people, they'll say things like, no, it's too divisive. I don't want to get involved. I'm just going to stay neutral. I've got news for you. Neutral is a myth. Neutrality doesn't exist. It's simply moral cowardice in disguise. Now, in this moment, neutrality offers no refuge, and silence is a choice that we can no longer afford. There's a cost in not getting involved, and I've learned this lesson very early in life. I'm going to share a story with you that my mom told me when I was a very little girl. Now, it's a story that's had a very profound impact on me, and it has stayed with me my entire life. Maybe you guys have heard it too. The story is of Kitty Genovese. Now, you see, I grew up in New Jersey, Paramus, right outside New York City. And like my mother and my grandmother before me, I'm a very proud Jersey girl. Now, my mom was involved in show business, and she was in theater. So she moved to New York City in her late teens to pursue her career. And at one point, she lived in Queens. So the infamous story of Kitty Genovese made a lasting impression on my mom, who then passed it along to me. Back in 1964, Kitty was brutally attacked outside of her apartment in Queens, New York, while she was returning home from her bartending job around 2:30 in the morning. She was approached by a man with a knife. He ran toward her. She ran toward her apartment, to her building front door, where the man grabbed her and stabbed her while she screamed. Now, a neighbor yelled out of his window, "Leave that girl alone," causing her attacker to flee. Kitty, now very seriously injured but still alive, crawled bleeding to the rear of her apartment building. 10 minutes later, her attacker returned. He picked up where he left off, brutally attacked her again, stole her money, and fled. Now, as the story's been told, several neighbors heard her cries for help, but no one acted, not in time. In fact, one neighbor cracked open his door to investigate what was going on. He sees Kitty laying on the ground, still alive and attempting to speak while her attacker is stabbing her. What did that neighbor do? He shut the door. He called a friend, asked his friend, "What do I do?" The friend said, "Don't get involved." No one got involved until it was too late. 28-year-old Kitty Genovese lost her life. And not because no one heard her, because no one was willing to step in. Now, that story haunted me for obvious reasons. And I remember asking my mom, I was like, "Mom, I don't understand. Why didn't anybody help her?" And my mom said, because they were afraid to open the door. They thought, not my problem. I'm not getting involved. But then my mom looked at me and said, "Tara, don't ever be one of those people." It shook something in me, because even as a child, I understood that silence is dangerous and doing nothing is a choice. And it's a choice that can have life or death consequences. Now, Kitty's case led to major research in psychology and sociology of something called the bystander effect. And in a nutshell, the bystander effect is a behavioral phenomenon where individuals are less likely to offer help in an emergency situation when others are present, often assuming someone else will intervene. So the greater the number of bystanders, the lower the likelihood that any one person will take action, the irony of that. So in essence, it's responsibility avoidance. You're hoping someone else will just do the right thing so you don't have to. Or maybe you just won't. Here's another little tidbit about that story. It's actually credited with a national emergency call system that we all know today as 911. Now, what I learned later on about Kitty's story is that she had a younger brother named Bill. And her story certainly shaped Bill's life. According to a 2015 Washington Post story, after he graduated from high school, Bill enlisted in the military instead of going to college. Now, he and his friends were looking for ways to, well, his friends, not him. They were looking for ways to dodge the draft, to avoid that responsibility. But that scheme reminded Bill of all those people who watched his sister die and did nothing. So he went to Vietnam and lost his legs. But Bill survived because his fellow Marines made a choice not to leave him behind. And years later, Bill teamed up with writer and director James Solomon, and they made a documentary about his sister's life called The Witness. Now, in that documentary, he says something very powerful. He said, lying in the middle of that rice paddy, I was completely alone. I thought of my sister, what it was like for her when she realized that no one was coming to save her. I tell Kitty's story because she didn't live to tell her own. Now, this story isn't just about tragedy. It's about moral crossroads, the kind that we face every single day. Now, the question becomes, which path will you choose when you're faced with a decision that requires moral courage? What if we taught courage the way we teach math? We teach kids how to add, how to subtract, find state capitals. We teach them grammar, science, how to code. But do we teach them how to stand up when they see someone being bullied? Do we teach them to speak truth to power when everyone else is silent? We drill them on essays and equations, but not how to hold their ground when the truth is under fire. Why not? Perhaps we need to redefine what it means to be a good citizen. What if we made moral and civic courage a required subject matter? What if we raised a generation to believe that speaking up, even when it's hard, is not just taught, but expected, not just rewarded? That standing up for what's right, it's not extra credit, it's the baseline. But courage isn't a character trait, right? You're not born with that. It's a civic skill, it's a habit, it's a muscle. What if we treated civic responsibility like a muscle we have to strengthen, not just during elections, but every day? And just like any muscle, it grows and strengthens the more you use it. What's the alternative? The bystander effect on a national scale. Now, moral ambiguity breeds confusion. It paralyzes action, and it erodes trust in institutions. We're seeing this manifest itself every single day because so many choose to be silent or indifferent or the status quo because, I don't know, maybe it benefits them or it's just easier. But as we all know, silence often enables injustices, which equals complicity. And history has shown us what the devastating effects of this can be. So we must challenge the social tendency to absolve these, what I call quiet enablers. The societal cost is just too great. Now, also throughout history, we've seen what one voice, what one act of defiant truth-telling can do, what it can ignite. Like a young black woman who refused to sit in the back of a bus in Montgomery, Alabama, or that student in Tiananmen Square who stood defiantly in front of that tank. A journalist who says, no, I'm under no obligation to tell both sides of a lie under the false equivalency of objectivity. Not today. Or the whistleblower who risks everything to say enough. I'll be the one to step up first. These are what I call moral first responders. These are the people who run toward truth while others run from it. Not because they're fearless, but because their conscience wouldn't let them do anything else. And every time people like that stand up, they light a spark. And that one spark can ignite a fire. Now, Kitty Genovese's death became a symbol of what happens when people choose comfort over conscience. But it doesn't have to be that way. Be the person who speaks up in uncomfortable rooms. Be the one who tells the truth even when it costs something. Be the citizen who refuses to make excuses for the inexcusable. Be the neighbor who calls, not just watches from the window. Be the spark. Don't wait for someone else. So I challenge all of you, when the moment comes, and it will, when called upon, which will you choose? Truth or deception? Comfort or conviction? Courage or convenience? Will you have the moral presence to say, this is wrong, and I won't pretend it isn't, and I'm going to say something, even if I stand alone? There's power in taking a stand, but being the first to speak up for what's right isn't easy, and it's often very lonely. Trust me, I know firsthand the heavy burden of being a truth teller in a time of universal deceit. But as Orwell once allegedly said, telling the truth in such a time is a revolutionary act. You won't always be applauded for standing up, but you will be remembered for it. Because history does not remember the quiet. Contrary to popular belief, revolutions don't often start with mobs. They begin with one person or a few having the moral courage to yell stop athwart history when no one else would. You don't need a title to take a stand. You don't need permission to tell the truth. The revolution we need, it won't be televised. It may not trend, it won't always feel safe, but it will be built, choice by choice, voice by voice, by those who refuse to be bystanders. Thank you.